Welcome everybody to today's webinar called Data Privacy and Security in Surveys. Very warm welcome. Stay tuned here. My name is Matthias Frye. I'm the regional manager for Central Europe. I'm responsible for handling customers, marketing, professional services and sales. And with me today is Marc. Welcome, Marc.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marc Oetzel. I'm a privacy counsel at Questback. I'm a member of the group-wide legal team. And as such, I'm working on data privacy issues in two ways, actually. The first is I try to support my colleagues that we are, as Questback, are processing personal data in a compliant fashion. And second, I try to support our development team that our products that we're providing to you are also compliant and support your work when you conduct a survey.
Great to have you here. I'm looking forward to this, Marc. We're talking about data privacy, so it's not a new topic. Everybody has heard about it. Safe harbor has been a big topic. I think GDPR is something that is in play right now. And if we take a look here on some of the logos, we see Facebook has been in the news recently. So it is important. What are we covering today about data privacy? I think we want to give you a little bit of a background out there. What is GDPR? What does it include? We are a survey provider, so we want to talk about the impact on surveys, of course, and what to look out for when you do surveys. And then finally, we have to give you a little bit of an update of how is Questback prepared and how can we help you to become prepared for this important topic. So this is it in a nutshell. Let's jump in right away. Maybe some of the folks out there are not so familiar with GDPR yet. What is it exactly? Can you talk about this a little bit?
Sure. GDPR has become one of the biggest topics in the legal profession, but also in every kind of business that is really processing personal data. So what the GDPR is about, it's a new regulation. It's adopted by the EU Parliament and it's enacted 2 years ago, and it comes into effect pretty soon. And it has the target to replace every local data privacy law so far that are in place, and is giving us a new standard throughout Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So the core is actually to provide an adequate and equal standard for data protection and privacy in the entire European Union.
Okay, so the key date is?
It's May 25th.
And I've learned recently, actually, I have to admit, I've learned that it is already in effect, but in a kind of trial test phase. But it will come into effect in May for hard, which comes to the question, what happens with previous regulations? I mean, all the countries had data privacy regulations previously. Are they gone?
Yeah, they are replaced actually. So each and every local or national data protection law we know so far, for example, the Data Protection Act in the UK or the Bundesdatenschutzgesetz in Germany, that will be replaced beginning May. And in most of the countries, it will be replaced by the GDPR, and second, new additional local laws that will, clarify actually and add something to the GDPR when there's some voids or some gaps. So it's really closing the regulation from the EU.
Okay, good. Yeah. Can you give us an overview of what GDPR includes?
Sure. GDPR comes in effect and brings many new changes, substantial changes for everyone who's processing personal data. And we try to, focus on a few key aspects which we'd like to bring to your attention today. In particular, those who are affecting the way how you handle your service in the future. So one key aspect would be that almost everybody who's processing personal data, either in the EU or regarding EU citizen, has to obey to the rules of the GDPR. Another aspect is that the responsibilities and the obligations for any data processor, such as Questback or any other provider, are substantially increased. So there's a lot of work for those providers and also for the controllers of data, who have to choose their providers very carefully. For many countries, there's a new concept of having a data protection officer. In other countries like Germany, that is an old concept, but many other companies in other countries really have to figure out who would be responsible and in charge for data protection issues in their organization. The fourth aspect would be the principle of accountability, which is actually a very general term for many obligations that organizations will face in the future. Just to mention a few.
Been a burden for quite a lot of customers to compile all that documentation. I've
Absolutely.
heard that a lot. Yeah.
Absolutely, and documentation is the key. I mean, you have to document each and every data processing activity in your organization. You have to define the purpose for each processing activity. You have to come up with a very robust deletion concept where you really decide which data will be deleted at what period in time. So that makes it's a fuss. It's really a big problem and a challenge for big companies. Well, on our fifth place in our list is the consent. Consent is probably the most important legal basis for processing data, and the GDPR actually rises the bar for obtaining a valid consent. So there have been some language in the GDPR really provides some good help, and there are additional guidelines from the privacy authorities that really clearly define how you obtain a valid consent. And if you are conducting a survey and you are relying on a valid consent, you really have to make sure that you obtain consent in a valid form. But I guess we are getting back to that later. Yeah. One other very critical point is there are several information duties that are imposed on organizations who are processing data. So whenever you're conducting your survey, you have to make sure that you give your customers, employees, very specific information, who you are, what you're doing with the data, and these information duties must be fulfilled actually most of the time when you really collect the data at the same time, so you can't delay that process. Again, individual rights is a concept that has been implemented with a previous regulation, but it has been, there's an increased standard of individual rights, so the scope of individual rights has been expanded. So there are many individual rights for data subjects, such as the right to object to processing, to demand deletion, or even to get an information or a form where data objects can ask which data is being processed, and they can ask you to transfer that data to some other provider. Then we have the concept of breach notification, which is kind of obvious, has always been in place. So you have to really obey to this 72-hour period of time. Whenever you detect there's a breach of data in your organization, you have to make sure that you are notifying the authority within short time. Then we have the international data transfer. That basically means whenever you transfer data outside the EU, you have to ensure that there are appropriate safeguards in place to ensure that there is an adequate level of data protection in this third country. And last but not least, probably something everybody has already heard of, that would be the severe sanctions that are now in place with the GDPR. So it really empowers the data protection authorities to impose very severe and strict and harsh sanctions on organizations who do not comply with the GDPR.
You can get into trouble, right?
Oh, really? That is expensive.
Absolutely. Marc, you mentioned data processors, data subject. Those are terms that are maybe new for some. How does it actually work with GDPR?
Well, that is a good point, because if you don't understand the terms, if you can't apply them correctly, you hardly get the sense out of the GDPR. So that's the reason why we came up with a slide to display how this really goes together with conducting a survey. So as a company who is collecting information and insights from the customers or the employees, you're regarded as a controller because you determine the way how the data is processed and for what purpose is being processed. So then you decide that you can't do it on your own, you need help, you choose a provider. That would be usually the processor of your data. So that could be, in the best case, that would be Questback, of course. So what you have to do is you select your provider carefully, and then you have to sign and agree on a data processing agreement with him. Your processor, if he doesn't, can provide all the service by himself, he has sub-processors. In our case, that would be the data group company who is hosting our IT services. We have also a data processing agreement in place with them to ensure that they are obeying to the same rules, that they provide the same standards of IT security and so on to our customers' data.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how this whole concept works.
Yeah. They put a chart in the back here with a global map on it, which brings me to the question, what if you operate partly outside the EU? It's EU law. Does it still apply, or are you free then with everything? Are there any complications around this? Global companies with headquarter in the US and some subsidiaries in the EU, for example?
That's a good point, Matthias. But most of the people think, if I transfer the data out of the EU, I'm freed of any obligation from the GDPR. That is, of course, not the case. So if you have, for example, a conglomerate of companies, there's a mother company in the US who wants to get access to personal data that relates to EU citizens, then you have to ensure that there are additional safeguards in place that really allow you to grant your mother company in the US access to those data. So there are many ways how to ensure this. Most commonly, people would refer to standard model clauses provided by the EU.
Okay.
Another way is, it's pretty much the gold standard actually, to implement internal guidelines like binding corporate rules, which have to be adopted and confirmed by the data protection authorities, something that our company works on actually. Okay. Or you can simply rely on privacy shields and certifications like that, but that is probably the worst way to do it. It's the least secure way to do it.
I think we heard about those attempts, right?
Yeah.
In the past, yeah. So I think that's good background for everybody. But now let's switch gears a little bit and change topic. How does it apply to surveys? So whether it's customer surveys, employee surveys, all kinds of market surveys, what's relevant then?
Well, as we just said, when we refer to the key factors or the key changes with the GDPR, the most important thing probably is to find a lawful basis for processing feedback data. So when you contact your respondents, that may be employees or customers, you have to really ensure that you obtain a valid consent. So what is a valid consent then? GDPR is pretty clear about that. So it says that any freely given specific and informed indication of an agreement is being regarded as the consent. And very important is the term informed. So you have to ensure that you provide your respondents with enough information so that they can really assess if they want to participate and give their personal data to you, and if they really want you to process this data. Because the GDPR really wants to entitle and enable people to freely decide if their data is being processed or not. So the information part is absolutely crucial. So you have to find a good way how to inform your customers and employees.
At the beginning of the survey screen, I understand, I agree, links maybe to additional information available.
Right.
That would be the idea, right?
Exactly.
Good. And what else? Other things to keep in mind?
Yeah, there are, as I just mentioned, there are many additional obligations imposed on data processors, in particular, and in controllers as well, obviously. So a key obligation is to provide specific information to respondents. So whenever a person is participating in your survey, you have to, by law actually, provide certain information, which is laid out in Article 13 and 14. Right. So we focus here on Article 13. And just to give you an idea what type of information that is a very long list actually of information, starting with the name and the details of the controller, that would be the company that is conducting the survey, down to questions of automated decision making and contact data of your data protection officers, retention periods, what is the purpose of using the data. So this list is just huge, and you really have to focus and be very diligent about providing all this information, so should choose a solution that really offers you that opportunity.
Okay. You mentioned data processes. Is that relevant as well?
Of course. I mean, that's the key aspect. Organizations usually do not conduct their surveys by their own, so they need help. They choose a provider, somebody who's processing their data. So the GDPR in Article 28 actually imposes another obligation. That means that data processors, the controller has to choose and select their provider very carefully. They have to ensure that this processor has certain technical and organizational measures in place and must be able to really prove that he's a reliable partner. So that's a key aspect. And if you find finally someone who fulfills these criteria, you have also to enter into a data processing agreement to really ensure that everything will be handled in a compliant manner.
Okay, so quite a lot to consider. Definitely not easy if you want to take all this seriously. Question, is there a way to cheat? What happens if I simply don't adopt to this? Is that an option?
Of course, you can always cheat, but it's an expensive hobby to do, right?
Okay.
We would never recommend to do that because...
I saw that coming, yeah.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, the sanctions that can be imposed by any party who's not compliant to the GDPR, they will be harsh. Supervisory authorities are entitled to come out with fines up to 20 million euros or 4% of your annual turnover. So that's quite some money.
Yeah.
So we have good reason to comply. In addition, all the respondents, all your data subjects you are dealing with, they have individual rights. So they can claim for damage and compensation as well if they think that there is a breach of data. And your competitors, if you do not obey to these rules, your competitors can even claim and demand omission and damages and all this stuff. So yeah, it's I guess it's not worth taking this risk because the awareness is increasing, so you're better advised not to try any trickery here.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the good news is that Questback has best practices for that, so we can definitely help you with that. We have examples of documentation, of all the communication around a survey when you conduct an employee survey, for example, or other surveys, how to inform the employees, and a ton more, so that's all available.
It sounds like you guys have many information in place and can really support us,
Absolutely.
Customers here. So what else can you offer to the customer?
I think there's a lot more, and that's a good news with Questback. I think we're definitely the smart choice here. For us, privacy is by design, and what I mean by that, it's built into the product. So all the aspects you spoke about, obtaining a consent, there's a feature that helps people who design a survey to get that done. The documentation, how we handle personal data, we're flagging it in the system. It's there to be retrieved and handled and deleted. So all of that is available out of the box. You don't have to worry about that, and that's there. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is we have a very, very professional data protection management. We have our data processing is compliant. We have all the routines in place, all the documentation in place. We have done our homework. You referred to the gold standard, which is the binding corporate rules. That is what we chose to adopt this best practices. So that's all there. And we have a dedicated team, that's the third aspect, that really is behind all this, that looks after data protection. So we have a data protection officer on a group level, but also on local levels because of our local entities in the different countries. We have our general counsel and compliance officer. We have our group information security officer because of course information security plays an important role. And last not least, we have you, Marc, as our privacy counsel. So I think there is a dedicated team looking after all of this. So
yeah. One interesting thing that you just mentioned, you mentioned a product, and we all know privacy by design is a very important principle of the GDPR. Can you give us maybe a sneak peek of what the software will look like? Are there any changes in the current software? Is there anything that's new?
There's a lot that actually comes out with the 2018 spring release. And there is a webinar available if you miss it. There's a recording available as well on our YouTube channel. there's release information, so tons of information, and this is maybe a little bit of an advertising of that webinar because we can't handle all of that today. But there's also more than just a product, of course. We have the technical requirements captured. We have, when we enter data processing agreements, we have very, very sophisticated and worked out technical and organizational measures that are part of that data processing agreement. Our server location is in Frankfurt in Germany, which is probably referred as one of the countries with the highest standards of data protection. And we last not least have all the certification, ISO, BSI, that you need to have in place, and that's not just on paper. It's checked and audited by the authorities on a regular basis. It's audited by customers on a regular basis. So I think Questback is truly a smart choice here.
Very good. I think actually we almost reached the end of our webinar.
Yeah.
So maybe it's time to sum up things.
Yeah,
Would you mind?
I think so too. So that was a lot that we covered. Maybe in a nutshell, hopefully we got across that if you do surveys, GDPR is relevant for you, otherwise you are in trouble. And when you want to become compliant, please look after managing the consent of the people, of the individual. Make sure that you handle all the notification that's required. Make sure that people are well informed about what you're doing, how you handle the data, about their rights. Think about how long you can keep the data and when you have to delete it, because that's critical to have the data retention periods worked out. And then finally, last not least, carefully select your provider for the survey and for the software as well. Again, Questback is a good choice there.
I think so.
That's a summary. There's probably some more questions open. If you have more questions, I mentioned a lot of material with a release webinar. We also have a blog article on data privacy. There is more information available in the release notes. And of course, you can ask questions at any time, even during the webinar. And with that, I would like to open for questions. Let me have a check here in our chat. So please use the chat box in the system to enter questions. And there's one already, there's a few. So I think this is probably one for you, Marc. How is the consent of the individual respondent actually documented? How does that work?
Well, so far, every controller organization is conducting survey has to do this documentation by their own. But I know for sure that with the new release, as you just mentioned, there are new features. And one feature will be that we have a very nice consent form. It's a very nice feature. And in this consent form, the user has actually to click a checkbox, and that click will be locked. And we also track the IP address. So it will be able for us to provide court-proof evidence that there is a valid consent in place. So you shouldn't be concerned about that any longer. So we provide you with the tools for proper documentation here.
Good. So check mark on that one as well. Next question comes, are there the new features? Is there any extra cost involved? I guess this is the cost for the customer. We had a ton of cost, not only the people I mentioned, but also our, of course, developers and product managers who designed and developed the product features. But the good news for you customers is we don't charge extra for data privacy. That's built into the product, and we don't put an extra charge on this. So this comes included.
So I just found another interesting question that relates to the withdrawing of consent. So if we have a survey and the respondent participated in that and later decides that he doesn't want to be processed any longer, so he revokes his consent, what's happening then? That's an interesting point, and the GDPR actually helps you there, because any respondent has the right to withdraw his consent at any time. So when he does so, from there on, we can't process the data any longer, but the feedback information still remains in the feedback data, so we're not losing any information or insights there. We just have to delete the personal data that is collected so far, and the entire process activity prior to the withdrawal of consent remains valid. That is, I think it's Article 7 or something. So we are on the safe side here and nothing to concern.
Cool. I see there's a few more questions. We will handle those via email subsequently, because we're coming to an end of this webinar. Again, more questions, please contact us. There is a solution sheet available, a blog available, information on our website, release webinar, release notes, a ton of information. We're there to help. Thank you so much for participating today and tuning in, and I hope to see you again very soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Bye.